Welcome to the DeFinity Market Strategy. I'm Paul Rodriguez of ThinkTrading.com, and I'm joined with Manu Choudhary, who's the CEO of DMA Link and the co-founder of DeFinity. Welcome, Manu. How are you this week?
Hey, Paul, not too bad. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you. It's all go for crypto at the moment.
It is. It's an interesting move, and I think the markets or the conventional markets have actually decided to begin to change their approach as well, which is interesting. So earlier this week we saw commentary from the Fed, and I found this slightly laughable, but apparently they may taper next month. They may taper next month. I'll be willing to wager they don't, but the market liked it. 10-year yield came off massively. We saw a 500-point move in the Dow yesterday, which is good. And everyone seemed to gloss over the fact that basically earlier in the week we saw month-on-month CPI in the United States for the month of September increased by 5.6%. 1 month. This is not Zimbabwe. This is not some banana republic. This is the United States, 5.6%. And we had consumer prices the day before yesterday coming out at the highest level in history. And it just concerns me a little bit that you're seeing this rhetoric, and the market seems to absolutely love it. And in the context of the fact you had the initial claims yesterday, unfortunately, there was only 300,000 people that were claiming first-time unemployment benefits, which was a good number apparently because they're expecting 500,000.
Right.
So it's a funny situation where the macro data really does not look very good. It doesn't look very rosy, but the markets seem to like it, and they seem to think that the Fed is going to keep on printing money, which suggests that they're probably not going to taper, which is an interesting position to be. But yeah, that was something I thought was quite worthy of note, certainly for the commercial markets. In the cryptoverse, really interesting transaction announced last week. So MoneyGram, the payment provider, essentially have signed a partnership deal with Stellar.
Oh, really?
So yeah, which is really interesting.
I didn't know that.
I was under the impression that Stellar was looking to acquire MoneyGram about 12 months ago. Anyway, so I'm not sure what happened there, but they signed an official partnership. So you can go to any of their branches, and they have shitloads of branches, and you can basically transact, buy and sell USDC running on the Stellar blockchain.
Wow. Okay.
Which is huge.
To be honest, the person that told me about Stellar and how it was something that was possibly better than Ripple was you. So I bought some. So thanks, Manu. That was great.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I think, in terms of payment rails, I think Ripple's decent. I just think it's probably a little bit past the sell-by date. And I think that I think Stellar is probably the more likely. Well, Stellar or Algorand, I'm still not sure which one is going to win the war, but one of those two are going to be the payment rails, I think.
Yeah, I mean, but they're at levels that are worth a risk to punt in both, I suppose. Small amount. Yeah.
I think it's definitely worth having a look. And then the other interesting thing was the Bank of International Settlements this week published a report. And if you don't know, the Bank of International Settlements is basically the central bank of central banks on crypto. And what's funny about the report, and I'll be honest, I kind of got to the summary. I haven't read the rest of it, but it's obviously very, very dry reading, given it's written by central bankers. But what's funny is they don't mention blockchain once. And it's talking about essentially the cryptoverse is talking about central bank digital currencies. It's quite a disturbing read because they openly accept that, as I kind of said before, there's no real benefit, certainly in the UK, certainly in Europe. In the United States, maybe, because the United States seems to have banking stuck in the 1970s. People still use checks. I've got to be honest, someone asked me for a check the other day. I don't know how the hell to write a check.
Right.
I haven't written a check for like 15 years. But,
yeah.
Anyway, so I can see there being zero real use case in the developed world. In developing countries, I completely understand. It makes sense because you have huge issues getting money in and out of those economies. It's very difficult. And then actually 2/3 of all the central banks in the world are not members of the Bank of International Settlements, which means they get absolutely taken to the cleaners by the 1/3 that are. So this remedies that problem. It also is very, very powerful in terms of making sure that you have financial inclusion or more financial inclusion within your society, because again, banking infrastructure doesn't exist in the same way in some of those emerging economies as it does in the UK. However, people have mobile phones. People can do things on their mobile phones. So this is wonderful. In the UK, in Europe, I really am not that convinced that this is necessary. I think there's another agenda, and they talk about it in this report. And the other agenda really is to combine monetary and fiscal policy. So what I mean by that is fiscal policy is obviously taxation and spending. Monetary policy is inflation, economic growth, unemployment. And they will combine that by having, for instance, a special deposit rate for you, Paul, minus 50%, for instance.
Right. Thank you very much.
Or a special tax that can be levied daily on me, for instance, because maybe I've said something negative about the government or something.
Wow.
Not that dissimilar to China.
Okay.
Apparently, they would never do this, obviously. And
No,
of course, look, this is conjecture. This is not what it says in the report. I'm just maybe taking this to the nth degree here, but nonetheless, I've got some quite serious concerns. And what's interesting is they admit in the report that they will really struggle to get more than 15% of the people in the UK or the West to adopt their currency. The only way they can incentivize people to do it is if they make it the means of payment for things like benefits.
Right. Yes. That's
very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you have any view on? I think Putin made some comments on the on Bitcoin that might have been positive, if my memory serves me. Unless you've seen them.
No, I have. Russia's a funny place. So so Bitcoin is not illegal there. You can own Bitcoin, you just aren't able to use it as a means of payment. So you can't pay for goods and services using Bitcoin, for instance.
Right.
And I think technically you're not allowed to have a wallet that's within the confines of the Russian Federation. So
you're probably not supposed to trade US dollar currency either there, like pay for stuff in dollars, I guess.
I would be willing to wager that is probably the case as well. So it's a funny system. I guess the one thing that's more positive about Russia than China is China are very concerned that people won't use their currency, which they won't because it's crap and no one wants their currency. And a digital version of it is just digital crap. So why would you want this? That's not quite the case in Russia. And I think what that means is that we're going to probably see more innovation from the Russians than we are, I think, sadly, from the Chinese.
Interesting stuff. So was that all on the news roundup, or should we go to the charts?
The only other thing to mention is really the move that we saw on Polkadot. The macro factor behind that was they essentially had a governance vote, and they've decided to start launching their smart contracts via the parachain auctions in November, which is very, very positive. So this is why we saw the DOT spike. Was it 24%?
Yeah,
it was pretty phenomenal. So that's the macro driver for this. But again, it's pretty positive, and I think it's setting up the market for, I think, more bullishness.
Yeah, well, interestingly, we had someone from the community last week asking for it to be in the weekly, or the previous week, I should say, asking for it to be in the weekly. So I put it in the weekly saying it was going to break out, and it didn't happen in 1 week, but it happened this week. So, it's I actually think that this is a broad thing that's happening across all the altcoins, and we're seeing the surge in the majors, and then it's just going to flow back. And so broadly speaking, it's positive. So I'll show you the charts because there's some great setups coming up that I think will be quite key going forward. And the story about the markets, if we start off with the equity markets, you're absolutely right. This talk of a rate cut, or not rate cut, but rates not being pushed up, has seen the equity markets push back up. And if we look at the S&P 500, it's still in this potential head and shoulders pattern. So the way it's going, it's still consolidating in this pattern. I think there's also in the UK, they're talking about interest rates perhaps not going up. So it's almost like as soon as there's signs that rates are going to go up, they kind of back off and just tell the market, oh, actually, this might not happen. But the technical pattern still looks like a reversal. So we're going to operate from the basis that this is a topping pattern. Now, it could fail and maybe the market will go into new highs. I'm not sure, but it's still a technical pattern that warrants more of a reversal sign. This is the NASDAQ than a continuation sign. So equity markets have had a good rally based upon some very good, potentially short-term news. But really where all the action is in the base metals, which are just soaring. So this is copper. I'll just go through them quickly. Aluminium, look at that massive move in aluminium. Just been watching that for weeks. Nickel looks like it's about to go. And lead is ready to go. It's made a high and it's come back, but it looks like it's going to go. And so there's still a interest. And you were mentioning inflation earlier, Manu, and there's definitely money flowing into real assets. If we look at crude oil, I mean, that's not stopped, and it's not going to stop. That's still going up. $90. It wouldn't surprise me. Natural gas, that's been all the rage, and we've been talking. We had problems in the UK with suppliers going bust. That's still not turned around. So what does that mean for bond yields? Well, bond yields were moving higher, and that was the core view for lots of reasons. We've seen a little retracement in the US 10-year, but that hasn't changed the trend. The trend is still up. So it wouldn't surprise me if, although the Fed was saying potentially that rates wouldn't go up, the market's actually not really going to believe that, because you've got to be eyeing these core assets and commodities and thinking there's so much inflation coming down the pipe that they're going to have to do something. And so it's not really moved much yet, but this has got plenty of time to accelerate. So the 1.774 level is absolutely key. So we'll see when it and if it gets up to that point. But overall, the trend is still up and nothing has really changed there. So we haven't talked about gold and silver for a while. And I think it's important to note that they are still in their consolidation phase. And again, I mentioned them in the weekly because very short term, silver had made a little inverse head and shoulders. It didn't have quite the space to put everything in there, but silver's made a little head and shoulders pattern, this small pattern here, which is a short term buy, but it's still operating within this massive range that has been going on since, sort of July last year. It's been between sort of 21.5 to the 30 level, but eventually this is going to break out. I mean, how can it not? Silver is such an important metal that it's used in industry, it's used in money, and is far superior conductor to any other metal. I mean, I just can't see why that would be going sideways when copper's going up and aluminium's going up. So if you could,
gold.
Sorry.
Sorry, I was just saying, unlike gold though, which there's gold that's still in circulation that was dug up by the Romans.
Yeah.
Unlike gold, silver is consumed. So if you look at the stats, there's about 900,000 ounces of silver mined every single year, and about 100,000 of those are consumed by the electric car industry. No, what's going to happen when that doubles or trebles or quadruples? And that's just one subset, by the way. I'm not even talking about the likes of Samsung and their use.
Is that market really going to take off? I mean, whether we want it to or not, it's going to, because this is where all roads are leading to, if you excuse the pun. This is what the government wants. I mean, certainly that's what's being pushed. Even though petrol cars are going to be phased out in 2030, the actual taxation pressure, certainly on anyone who's living in London driving a car, is going up and up and up. We've just had a fuel crisis, and there is something called the ultra low emission zone, which we have in London. I know you may be in another country, you might not know what that is, but that's basically taxing older vehicles. So they are coming after anyone with a petrol or diesel car. So whether the actual legislation comes in 2030 is irrelevant, because they're going to force everybody over to electric cars. We're all going to be buying them. So price of silver, if it's not $100 in a couple of years, I'd be very surprised. But over to the main interest for this week, and what we've been waiting for is this bull run in cryptocurrencies. So this week we had a breakout. I actually put the weekly out a bit early. It was for workload reasons, but it actually worked out pretty well, because we caught this breakout to the upside that is pushing Bitcoin towards its prior high, and this is exactly what we would expect to happen. Now, there will be a pullback, and that will be a pullback that we can buy into, but this is the move that should take us to 100,000 before the end of the year. And as you know, I'm not always as bullish. I will tell you when I feel strongly about something. I was more cautious when the market was consolidating, and I thought that was warranted given the price action. But now it is moving towards a potential sharp upward move. So just to repeat, I think there will be a pullback, and I think it may be rather large, but I don't think it will get below the 54,000 level, which was the Rubicon level that I talked about for a long time. But either way, the trend is now moving up. There's lots of things in its favor in terms of inflation. The equity markets may go down, but we've seen that the correlation doesn't seem to hold quite so well. So there seems to be, for me, a bit more of a safe haven play moving into crypto. Ethereum is exactly the same. We got this triangular constriction pattern, which is usually a very good odds-on breakout pattern, which I put in the weekly, and the market's moved up from that. Now, the last time we were close to a breakout level, this 40-30, the market came all the way back down again. And so it's coming back to this 40-30 level. If it can take that out, it's got to go for the all-time high. So it's getting exciting. I think we're nearly there in terms of smooth trends. We need to be free of this price action. So it needs to be above the all-time high, which is coming in at 43.84. In terms of volatility, it could be there very quickly because the market is moving so fast. But the underlying altcoins are consolidating, waiting to go. So look at this chart of Cardano. It's in a triangle. So it's just going sideways. But at some point, this is just going to pop to the upside. Because at the moment, this is a classic continuation pattern. So it should break out before it reaches what's called the apex. It's getting very close to it. So if it hasn't broken out by this time next week, I would be a bit disappointed. I'd also slightly worry about it, actually, because it should really go. But if it doesn't, it's just a probability thing. So this should be ready to break out, and I would expect it to go quite quickly and head towards this 3.09 level over the coming weeks. If we look at Solana, it's done exactly the same thing. This is now a triangular constriction, and it's breaking up to the upside. So this should head towards all-time highs at 216 and beyond. This is a very nice consolidation. Did not end up turning up into a top, so that should move as well. So DOT, again, that was the one that was asked about, and we featured it before, I think, but it's been in a triangular constriction, very similar one. Has now punctured the upper boundary of that, and it's forming what's called a flag formation, and that's a little consolidation before it pushes up once again. And Matic has just gone today, so that's just starting to break out. And again, it's in this massive triangular constriction. If I put the chart onto a weekly chart, you can see what I'm looking at here. This is sharp upward move, triangular constriction, and then normally we see a very similar sharp upward move. So this would imply that it would get to at least 12 when it breaks out. So there is some justification behind the bullishness that's going on in the altcoins. It's becoming a more broader move. So whilst it was the sort of newer technologies, the exciting technologies, perhaps the only technologies that the community knows about, and that you guys are like really far advanced, and there's so much to pass when it comes to data and information. You're at the leading edge, and this just kind of filters down into everybody else much further along. So it was a coin picking market at one point, but now it's becoming a broad market, and I think that is a sign that we're in a new bull phase. So it could be a very exciting time. October, again, is a difficult time for stocks, so we will be watching those closely. But overall, it's a positive market. So any final thoughts from you, Manu?
No, I think we covered pretty much all the bases.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thanks very much for listening. If you've got anything that you'd like to add, if you've got any markets you want to look at, stick them in the comments. We'll put them in the weekly, or we'll chat about it on this show. And thanks very much for listening, and we will catch you next time.